This is Matrilineal Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired to inspire.
Mr. Ndlovu, what is interesting is how you have first reacted to systems of injustice throughout your life. There was a time when you were in Bulawayo, when you say you were first with the tribalism. I would like you to give us a bit of information pertaining to that incident, where you had to lose an opportunity of getting a job.
Yes, it was after I had left my job as a shop assistant in the family business in Plumtree, where I had been working for Matwaza Enterprises, which is my family business. After I left that job, I went to Bulawayo with the hope of improving myself and maybe getting a better job with a better salary. And during those days, with my Rhodesia Junior Certificate, I could qualify for apprenticeship and quite other opportunities. But due to the fact that I didn't have many contacts in Bulawayo as somebody who had grown up in the rural areas, I went with everybody to the industrial area to go and queue for jobs. So there was a job that was advertised at, it was Rhodesia Oxygen then, Rodox. And with my Rhodesia Junior Certificate, I thought I would qualify. So I woke up in the morning with the rest of other job seekers and went there, and we had to queue outside, and then they would come and pick up those they wanted to pick up, shortlist, and then give the jobs. So in this incident, I was shortlisted, and definitely I had qualified for the job. And then I went home, supposed to come back in the morning for induction. Unfortunately, I hadn't asked other people around how things went. So when I came back in the morning, instead of going straight for induction, somebody met me and diverted me from the induction room and told me that, no, there was a mistake yesterday. It's unfortunate you didn't get the job. Then I only learned later on that that company actually employed a certain tribe, and they were ring fencing that to the extent that no other tribe would be employed in that firm. And to be honest with you, that opened my eyes, and I was very, very, very bitter and very much discouraged. That is the incident. That was my first, when I came face to face with tribalism.
So because the tribalism that we have in Zimbabwe right now is aimed at people from Matabeleland. So at that time, who was being favored at that time?
The person the person who was in charge was a white guy.
Mm-hmm.
So first day, it was the white guy who did everything. But without being tribal, but mentioning what happened, the guy who intercepted me the following day was a Shona guy, who was, I think, a supervisor or so, because I don't know how the company was run. I had not yet worked in the company. But that's what happened. That when I came the following day, the guy who intercepted me to tell me that I didn't qualify for the job was a Shona guy.
Okay. All right, Mr. Ndlovu, as I said, I've got your book here. To those who haven't seen the book, this is the book. How you wrote and in terms of the process of writing the book and the length of writing it, What was the process, Baba Ndlovu?
It took me about 4 years to write this book. First of all, I had my manuscripts. The first manuscript was in 1982, when I was in Botswana. But that one, when I was arrested in Botswana, it was confiscated, and I don't know what befell of it. But then, after I had settled, that is, after my release from prison, I started compiling notes for me to come up with this book, to the extent that I had a full manuscript.
Yeah, in terms of your language, the mastery of English language, if you can maybe just tell us, how did you achieve that?
Well, I think this came about as a result of my attitude towards oppression from the beginning when I went to school. Because at standard 3, well, we did standards ourselves when we were at school in the 60s. Because at standard 3, I would argue with teachers, actually, in terms of English language. Mm-hmm. So it's something that, and by the way, my mother was a teacher, and she didn't like me becoming number 2, you know, although it didn't happen the way she liked it. But I think it's something really that developed out of my hatred for oppression anyway, even in the family.
Because yes, the way you write is so excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. When you were young, you grew up under the care of your grandmother.
Yes.
She seems to have had a significant impact in your life. Can you just maybe briefly tell us about her and your relationship with her?
It was due to the fact that my mother was a teacher, and my father was not well. My father was not well, so my mother was a teacher. So most of the time she was not at home. So I had, from a very, very tender age, to be brought up by my maternal grandmother. She was an authority of her own. Mm-hmm. You know, in the 60s, it was not easy to find a woman who had her own head of cattle, you know, who managed her own affairs like my grandmother did. Mm-hmm. And she had never seen the door of a classroom. Mm-hmm. But she was somebody who was very, very confident of herself. My grandmother, every season of the year, she had something to do to sustain us. And I realized later in life, when people in positions of authority, like the village head, the headman, they used to come and talk with her. It's only later on in life that I realized that she was an advisor of sorts. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I never forget is the day I left home going to South Africa. Mm-hmm. I got out of the gate, and I think she remembered after I was out of the gate. She came to the fence and called me and said to me, "Grandson, wherever you are going, anybody who is the size of your father is your father. Anyone who is the size of your mother is your mother. Go well."
Yeah. No, from the book, she appears to be someone very special.
Yes, very, very special. Very special, because even when she was during her last days, mm-hmm. I was in prison in Chikurube at that time. And when I came out, I gathered that she had vowed that she won't die before I come out of the prison. And after coming out of prison, it didn't last.
Ah. Do you think, in a way, you have her qualities?
Well, that can be judged by others. But I think really, she had an impact on my.
All right.
Because even.
Now let's talk about your liberation struggle. The liberation struggle vision, wishes that you had when you joined the struggle, did it translate into reality in 1980?
Not at all. Not at all.
What was the difference?
You see, the difference is that when I went to the struggle, I knew what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we go to Zambia, actually, there was a slogan by those we found there about Ondondabo, meaning people who have just come because the war is there, or it's in fashion to go to war. But I was not one of those. I knew exactly what I wanted because I had experienced exploitation, I had experienced oppression, I had experienced apartheid, I had experienced tribalism, I had experienced bullying. So I know exactly what I wanted, and I had a rough idea of what independence should be like. So when we came back in 1980, actually the build up to independence on its own, the build up one could tell that things are not as they are supposed to be. Yes.
And how did that freedom look like in your vision, in your imagination?
I was looking at a Zimbabwe that was going to be the direct opposite of Rhodesia. Because I had lived in Rhodesia, I had lived in South Africa, apartheid South Africa. So I was looking at a situation where Zimbabwe was going to be exactly the opposite of Rhodesia. But unfortunately, even during the first days, one could tell that Rhodesia had been inherited by Black people.
And maybe briefly, if you can describe what Rhodesia was like, so that at least we understand. Because if you say you wanted something directly opposite to what Rhodesia was like.
Rhodesia, beginning with the 60s, when I started opening my eyes. I don't want to preempt it so that people we end up not reading my book. You know, when we grew up, we had people who had 200 head of cattle. I saw them with my own eyes. My grandmother had 30 head of cattle. You know, I saw them with my own eyes. But when these resources were culled, I was there. When the white men culled the cattle, I was there. I mean, all the people at the deep tank were beaten up like children by the DCs, they call the district commissioners, the white district commissioners. And even the education system, it was a pyramid like. You would find that we started school maybe being 200. At the end, the system would end up having 2 or 3 out of the 200. People would systematically count so that they don't reach that level where they could challenge the system. I know what I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. Just to say to the people who like to ask questions, I would prefer that you talk to Mr. Ndlovu directly rather than writing your questions. So I will give you an opportunity to interact directly with Mr. Ndlovu. Let me just ask, I know you went to Zambia, you started your training there, then you went to Russia, where you did your training there. Then, in fact, you were a group of 180 when you went to Russia, and then you came back still the same number, 180. Then when you came, there were happenings that I did not understand, that I would like you to indulge us in. When you arrived, you were put in a location or a camp that was near Zambezi. To me, it leaves you vulnerable to the Rhodesians. Then you were not armed in that camp for some time, maybe a couple of weeks or so. And then when you were given some guns, they were not enough, only half of you, because one gun for 2 people, which seems unreasonable to me. What would you say about that scenario? What was happening actually?
Well, what I can say is that after our return, the briefing that we got was very encouraging, very encouraging, that even ZAPU was now a government in exile. But when it came to that situation that we are talking about, all what I can say is that something somewhere had gone terribly wrong. That's all I can say, that something somewhere had gone terribly wrong.
Okay. So something somewhere had gone terribly wrong.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because civilians like us, what we knew is that ZAPU was an old machinery. So we thought that maybe the management, the commanders, everything was just superb. But from that incident, it got me thinking.
Well, the struggle has its own challenges.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, one wouldn't have expected the struggle to be smooth. Only that sometimes, like I said, that even writing a biography, there's a form of bias. So sometimes when people write about their own organization, there are certain things that they won't mention.
Of course.
Yes,
of course.
But what I can say is that something that showed that something had gone terribly wrong somewhere. And maybe no wonder why ZAPU and ZIMPRA were in the situation that we are in today.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe because of your character, your vision, your intelligence, your understanding of the struggle. There were times when you want the leadership, particularly towards the negotiations, that if ZAPU or ZIMPRA doesn't negotiate at the time when they had that military power, then after that, that was going to be difficult. So would you say that the management or the military command or even the political leadership did not really understand what was going on, or they ignored what they were saying?
Well, it is difficult to understand what was going on, to be honest, because I would like to say at this point that I was one of those people who was dragged screaming into this situation. But obviously, as an organization, sometimes when people don't expect something from someone else other than you, whatever you raise sometimes is regarded as indiscipline. But only for people to realize later that no, it was not indiscipline, but it was an insight.
Yeah. You paint a picture just immediately, maybe just before and immediately after independence, a very, very dire situation for the ex-ZIPRA combatants. And you have also mentioned what is now known as the Shona Grand Plan. Would you say that the Kukura-Wundu genocide was something that was planned well in advance, or it was in reaction to something? As you know, that many other people are saying that Kukura-Wundu was put in place because of the ZIPRA who wanted to topple the government.
It is very unfortunate that the world believes that, and also most unfortunate that even some former ZIPRA believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you tell me that Kukura-Wundu was a reaction to, well, they say it was a reaction to the so-called dissidents. That's what they say. In other words, you mean to tell me that Morogoro didn't happen? You mean to tell me that Ngagao didn't happen? That's what you are telling me if you say Kukura-Wundu was a reaction to ABC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we talk of this grand plan, which was in 1979. Obviously, when it was planned, it had to be implemented at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to history, you'll find that these things didn't only happen. The leadership of ZANU would say something before it happened, but unfortunately, it was not taken. For instance, when Mugabe say the people of Matabeleland needs to be reoriented,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but people didn't take heed of that. How do you reorient a people from what to what?
Yeah.
From which belief to what belief, or from which culture to which culture, from which tradition to what tradition, to which tradition?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so these things, you know, well, people might think it's the benefit of hindsight, but even during those days, like I'm saying that, I'm one of those people who were dragged screaming into this situation.
Yeah.
Because not that I was a prophet, but you could just map up the situation and see where we were going.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just the grand plan. This is 1979 grand plan. You know, some people are dismissing it. They say there is nothing like that. From your side, what do you think? Do you think it is a document which is out there, which was written by ZANU? What
You
do
know,
you think?
you know, it might not be a document as people are saying, but what is happening on the ground is exactly what is in that paper.
Yeah.
It might not be a document as people want to believe, but what is happening on the ground now to somebody who is honest, even whether Shona, Ndebele, Kalanga, Venda, that is exactly what is happening on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't have any reason of denying that document, looking at what is happening in the country, especially in Matabeleland.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me ask you this question, then I give people an opportunity to interact with you.
Yes.
In terms of arrest, court trials after independence, how many and what were the charges against you?
The first charge in December, when I was convicted, by the way, I was convicted on the 17th of April, a day before celebrating independence in 1984. And the charge was Section 50A of the Law and Order Maintenance Act, being accused of possession of arms of war and being a dissident. That was the first treason charge at the Magistrates Court in Bulawayo. The second treason charge, that was after the Unitary Court, actually in March 1988, at the Harare High Court. It was treason because some other former ZIPRA who had been deported from Botswana, they incriminated me, and I had to be part of that trial. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your opportunity. You can raise your hand, then you ask your question. Let me read this one. Oh, he's asking, how do I buy the book? How much does it cost? And this other one, what was your vision of an independent Zimbabwe? Would you reflect that your views, reflections and manuscripts altered somehow with the latter version?
Let me start with the first one about where the book can be bought from. It's unfortunate because I'm still trying to have it published in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. I'm in the process of doing that. But currently, you can only get it on Amazon. And maybe if you've got a relative or a friend who is in the UK, in Canada, in the rest of the world, actually, in the rest of the Western world, you can buy it from Amazon. So that's about the book. And also, yeah, Amazon. And then if you've got a friend, a relative in the UK, or if you are able to order it from Amazon from there. But I'm trying by all means to have it published where people can have access to it. That's about the book. And then the alteration of manuscripts due to all I can say is that I had to make some additions. I had to make some addendums due to the prevailing situation, but otherwise nothing changed from the original.
Okay.
If you have to read the book, you realize that.
Okay. And the other one was about your vision.
My vision about an independent Zimbabwe was based not on basically on my individual conviction, but as an organization, as ZAPU, it had an ideological concept that guided what Zimbabwe was going to look like. And I think when we came home in 1980, ZAPU did that to try and implement the concept. If you look at the properties that were bought, that are now mentioned only in terms of hiding arms, whereas those were economic resources, trying to show the world what we wanted to do as ZAPU, which unfortunately turned out to be what it is today. So my vision for an independent Zimbabwe was an all-inclusive Zimbabwe, where people were going to own the means of production. And even that, if you look at how ZAPU wanted to approach the land issue, let me say this, if people maybe don't understand, because there are a lot of things that have been said and a lot of things that are happening. When those farms were bought, people must not forget that whites were not sure whether to stay or to go. And the strategy was to buy them out before they knew it, so that when they will be coming back, they'll be buying land purely on business basis, at our own terms. But that they realized, and they used some of us to disrupt those programs. Yeah. So my vision for it was an inclusive Zimbabwe where people will own the means of production. One thing that I didn't have in mind, and which was actually what ZAPU was all about and ZIPRA was all about, was tribalism, racism. We wanted a Zimbabwe where we would work together as equals. That was my vision for the country. I never had, even after being abused, both in Zimbabwe and in South Africa, had that mind of retribution. I never had that. And if you read the book, you find that I had whites after independence who were friends. And my best friend, actually, if you talk of a friend, is somewhere in Bindura. You know?
Yeah. Considering that at independence, the government implemented this system of tribalism, do you think there is still a chance that a unified country or nation can be a possibility still? What do you think?
If you read the book towards the end, you'll get the answer. But what I can say is that it will take a brave leader or brave leaders to reverse the institutionalized tribalism to remain with Zimbabwe as a unitary state. Well, some people think it's daydreaming, but I don't know whether people study histories of other people. For instance, recently, the Rwanda thing. I'm not trying to be sensational here. I'm talking about how history pans out if things are not handled properly. Because you will never suppress a people. That is impossible. You can do it for a time, but not forever.
Okay. Do we have questions? Anyone who would like to ask? Sometimes I know it's difficult to raise a hand. You can talk.
Hello, Baba. Sorry, I'm trying to put and sorry, I put questions on the platform.
Okay.
My name is Angela Stuve, and I am one of the women that benefited greatly from the gains of the struggle. So I would like to thank you, Baba Ndlovu, and all the other people that fought for us to be in a better place. I was the first DA in Matabeleland. I was the first woman DA in Matabeleland. I was the first woman provincial administrator in Zimbabwe. And I don't think those things would have happened pre-independence. So I'm just saying this as a precursor, because I feel that ZAPU liberated us. I also worked Ngisaseku Governor's Office. I worked with a few governors. I worked with Welshman Mabena. I worked with Jivan Masego. I worked with Mudenda when I first joined. And Mzileti Zwelibanzi, who was also an ex-combatant himself. So I really learned from the best, and I'm grateful for that. I think, so I've asked the two questions there. Unfortunately, I took your book to read when I went on holiday in America, but I was dispossessed of it before I could read it. So I haven't read it. But I suppose my questions are, you've partly answered it. I think the gender issue, talking about your grandmother. And also, I think I'm curious about the women in the struggle and how you interfaced with them and how you feel that they've panned out, things have panned out for women emancipation or women gender mainstreaming in Zimbabwe, and what you think, has perhaps been different from what the vision of ZAPU and ZIPRA was on women and on gender mainstreaming. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Baba Ndlovu.
Okay, Ms. Dube, thank you very much for acknowledging that ZAPU did the best it had to do. In terms of women empowerment, when I did my basic training in Zambia before I went to the USSR, we had women in our training, and I think our group had the biggest number of women than any other group that was before us. We trained together, and it actually taught us that what we had grown up knowing, that women belong somewhere, is not true. It's not a reality, and that's why you find that ZAPU had programs that we're trying to make women confident, as opposed to what they had been in Rhodesia. And when we came home, actually, those programs were put in place. For instance, the Mguza Technical College, where our women were there doing what they knew best. But unfortunately, you know what happened? That Gugura Wundi went there and disrupted the project. When the whole thing became national, whereby it was no longer ZAPU detecting terms, I believe those women that had been trained by ZAPU didn't fulfill the potential that they were supposed to for the development of the country. And gender mainstreaming, as you are saying, it ended up being taken over by liberals. And well, I don't know whether that achieved what ZAPU would have achieved. Thank you. I wonder whether I answered your question.
Mama.
Sorry, Baba, I had muted myself. Thank you. Yes, I think you did answer that. I suppose my other question is now, I'm quite sure that you have dealt with it, but like I say, unfortunately, I haven't read the book. Is the issue of where are we going then with economic empowerment of the people? Because I can see the poverty that is there now. I don't think it was ever ZAPU's plan, and it was never even in our wildest dreams that we could see the level of poverty and corruption and all the wrong isms that we're seeing now. So yeah, maybe did you comment about such things in your book, or is it something that you can offer reflections on?
Yes, I thank you, Ms. Dube. I think I did comment about all those things. But for a people, you ask for the way forward. For a people to develop, there should be unit of purpose in the first place, and the roadmap to where we are going as a nation. But as it is, Zimbabwe now, Zimbabwe now is a divided nation. Whether we like it or not, that is what is there. I mean, the media can try by all means to paper things here and there because maybe it favors one side of the story. But we are a divided nation, and it's very, very difficult to gauge where we are going. First, people have to be united. I mean, it's a simple concept, really. Even if you look at the ants, how the ants work to build an anthill, there has to be unity of purpose. But as it is now, it is as if the main elephant in the room is institutionalized tribalism. It discourages other tribes. It not only discourages them, it denigrates them. And so it's very difficult. Even people with who have the potential to contribute towards the development of the country, they don't have that opportunity. And some have even given up. So it's very difficult at this point to say where we are heading to. Maybe the next generation, that is, if we are going to have leaders who are brave enough to deal with this institutionalized tribalism so that people can exercise their potential without fear or favor.
Baba Nkala, can I ask my last question so that I can defer to others?
That's okay.
Yes, so Baba Ndlovu, in your book, well, like I said, I haven't read it, but do you feel that going to the struggle did affect your relationships with the significant others, like your family and so on? What was the impact of you going to war and you going to prison and your stand on your family relationships, both your immediate and wider family?
Thank you, Ms. Dube. To be honest with you, I've tried to find out what I can do to my family because my family stood with me through thick and thin. In all these situations that I went through, my family stood with me. Not only because maybe I'm born in that family, but just because most of them are conscious people who understood. Maybe it's the like Mr. Nkala said, it's the heritage from the grandmother and my mother also, because she was somebody who was a community person, a community leader in her own right, and somebody who was conscious, who was not doing things because they are fashionable, but who was doing things because they are supposed to be done to assist the community and the society at large. My family relationships were never touched. They remained intact. And also maybe partly because I understood my situation. And when I came home, first from the struggle and then from the prisons, the various prisons, and all these situations where sometimes they thought I was dead. When I came, I knew my place and I knew how they felt. So I knew how to handle it. And I found that they were ready to accept me. My family is intact. Thank you.
Mr. Ndlovu, you have mentioned institutionalized tribalism as the elephant in the room. Maybe taking from other countries, what has been your experience in terms of how they have dealt with institutionalized tribalism or any kind of schisms? In our case, how can we really deal with that? Because it's a very difficult issue. In the fight, you might become tribalistic yourself. So how do we deal with that?
Yes, that is very true, that you end up sounding tribalistic, even if you want to expose what is wrong to all the people in the country. But you end up sounding tribalistic because that is a base that has been laid. It's unfortunate that we even have young aspiring leaders who are very charismatic, but at the same time they admire what Mugabe did. It's a paradox. It's a dichotomy. It's very painful, to be honest with you. So the way to deal with it, first of all, the genocide has to be solved. There's no other way. The genocide has to be dealt with openly and in good faith, not what is happening now. Then after that, there can be civic education, a national project to bring people together so that people realize that they are citizens first before anything else. That political parties come and go, but citizens will remain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bagwetu, if you've got questions, do you think that the government has recognized the liberation fighters enough? I remember you also spoke about, was it Douglas Nyoloma Ndebele Dlovu,
yes.
Who disappeared in South Africa. You felt that he wasn't, no one is spoken about his contributions in the liberation struggle. No recognition whatsoever. So in a nutshell, do you think the liberation fighters have been accorded that status that they deserve?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Let me start by Douglas' case, because Douglas was our organizing secretary during the ANC. You know, when all parties came under Mzolewa for certain reasons. He was our organizing secretary in Sandton in Johannesburg, and he was abducted after. Well, I don't know what happened. Somebody sold out, I think. Then he was abducted. And they found him with books, with receipts and everything, and he disappeared. He was never seen again. And like you said, he has never been mentioned anywhere in history. And there are many like him who have never been mentioned. Not only that, we have got people who were eaten by crocodiles in the Zambezi River. We have people whose bones are lying everywhere across the country. So things have been done at face value. I think it was because there was a false start to our independence. That's what caused all this. Because if things had been done according to what the liberation struggle was all about, all this would have been dealt with. So I guess even today, Nkala, war veterans themselves today, they are waging demonstrations, and it took them how many years to be recognized? From 1980 to 1997. Just imagine. But the Rhodesian forces were given got their pensions from the beginning. As they just continued as if nothing had happened. But war vets had to rebel against the government for them to get whatever they got, which actually put them at odds with people because people don't understand. They think they were given that 50,000, and that 50,000 damaged the economy up to this day. But I mean, that's not it, because they're supposed to get that money not from our own economy. There were monies that were donated. For instance, Zimcoat money. There were a lot of monies that were donated in 1980, which were abused. And we know of the scandals.
Yeah.
So when the war veterans were given that money grudgingly, it was taken from a wrong source. But people don't understand. They think, oh, these war veterans, they are like mercenaries. They demanded this and demanded this. Of course, one of the other things also that makes war veterans demand this and that is that the situation is not as it is supposed to be. Because in the first place, if the economy was working as it was supposed to be, all these demands wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we have been segmented into groups, and sometimes we think we're entitled. So what can we do? That's the situation that is there. Organization that is formed by a nucleus of strong families becomes very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Ncube, you can ask your question or your comment.
Oh, siyabonga, salibonani babungikala lo babundlovu labanye abakhona. Mina ngithi ngibonge ukuthi sithole umuntu onjengoBaba uNdlovu. uBaba uNdlovu is very inspiring. I'm one person who benefits a lot from him. He will call you regardless of your social status. I'm one person who is so lucky to receive calls are very, very encouraging, motivating from uBaba uNdlovu. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. Unfortunately, I'm wondering why the issue of the book has never come between the two of us. But I definitely wanted to read the book. I need the book as of yesterday. Siyabonga kakhulu Baba uNdlovu. Ngabe bonke abantu abalwela ilizwe bafana lawe Baba uNdlovu, mbona ngathi ngabe sisemhlabeni owehlukileyo kakhulu. Bebengeke bakuvuma uku-abuse abantu, abanye baze babe tribal njengendlela esiyibonayo besenziwa ngabanye ababelapha. Siyabonga kakhulu Baba uNdlovu, lingadinwa lakusasa. Asifuni kumelela ukuthi kuze kuthi hayi Baba uNdlovu selichile sesingikhona sisiyakhuluma gloringly or glowingly about you. Endlovu Baba, lingadinwa lakusasa. Siyabonga Baba Nkala.
I'm humble. Thank you.
Yes.
Siyabonga Baba Ncube. Hayi. Siyabonga kakhulu. Anyone before we Seshi?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Nkala, for this presentation. Thank you to uBaba uNdlovu. I will also ask a controversial question to uBaba uNdlovu. He can answer it if he feels he can. Having gone through what you have gone through and what is in your book, by the way, I was one of the first customers to buy the book. Where is it?
Thank you.
I've got it right here. Oh, sorry, I'm not on video, so you won't be able to see the book. Anyway, What do you see? Do you see yourself in the political sphere of Zimbabwe as we are talking about what's going to happen? And you've said, you know, everything does come to an end. Do you see yourself being involved somehow in the forefront, background, whatever, spiritually, in the Zimbabwean political arena or rebuilding of Zimbabwe somehow before you hand over to the next generation? Don't tell me about the next generation. I'm talking about your generation. Thank you. Because the
Well,
reason why I asked, can I
yes.
just say, the reason why I asked is because it will be a waste for people like you to just disappear. And there's a whole lot of you. And I'm also talking to somebody like Mrs. Angela Stube here. I'm asking probably both of you now, because you're the ones that I know here in this platform. Thank you, Nyabo.
Okay. All I can say in answer to your question is that I think I'm doing something.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the background, then, is that what you mean?
Yes. Yes. Not
Rather in the
only
forefront.
yes, in the background, and also well, you know, I've known of dreamers and the leaders and the who have changed situations without being in the forefront. That's all I can say. But I think I'm doing something.
Ah, thank you.
I always challenge myself.
Thank you. Sis Angela's.
Hello. Right. I think there is a difference. I mean, I don't want to say I'm a political person in the sense of actually being a politician. I'm a doer. I'm a professional. I want to support and enable, but I need an enabling system to do things. And, you know, I'm not going to talk about the whole issue of how things can change in Zimbabwe, but I'm going to talk about my passion for the ZIPRA and you know, the people that fought for us. And for me, one of the things that we need to be doing now, which I feel is really late and we haven't done it. I mean, I went to study these things with Dallas, Smithsonian, Apartheid Museum and all that. I feel that we need an actual museum of war, right? Where we can actually display the things that were used. What did a ZIPRA look like? What was he wearing? What was his kit? What was he expected to do? You know, so we need that museum which shows us, you know, how they were doing things and the narrative. So we need to be establishing that museum to help us to do that, so that for posterity, abantwana kusale kukhona for isizukulwane going forward. The other thing is that now a lot of them are in their sunset or twilight years, and they need help because they are now vulnerable and they are now, you know, in life here, they are quite frail now. We need to be thinking about things like, you know, indawo abangafikela kuyo say eBulawayo, where you have like lapha kuthiwa ngama-centers, where you have a center and they come in and there's doctors, or they can see a doctor, they can see a nurse, they can see their friends, they can have a coffee, they can relax, they can have counseling, they can have someone to talk to, chess, have a nice cold drink, and maybe have a place to sleep. So for me, we've lost the plot because of what's happened to us. And in that process, and the good things that we have as a people. You know, when someone gets to you, or whatever, you know, you'd help all those things. If we think about that small kind of a scenario that I'm painting, then you can think about the bigger picture, because you are restoring Ubuntu, their respect, their dignity of people. And you can then translate that to the rest of the population. So in terms of a development plan for Zimbabwe, I think we can do that very quickly, but the problem is the enabling environment and also getting the resources. I mean, to think ukuthi 15 billion yadliwa. Huh? Imagine what 1 billion could have done for that country, or just for Manika land. Imagine that what that 1 billion could have done. You know, we would be much better than here. Everyone would be wanting to go home. We don't want to be here. Tina says England, we don't want to be here, we want to go home. But we are worried for our own safety. So those are the issues that we have. And I don't know whether those will resolve in our lifetime. So that's all I can say safely at the moment. Thank you.
I didn't know that you are so passionate about these things. Baba Ndlovu, let me ask you to give us your closing remarks. And listen until if someone has got a question or comment. Okay. There is no hand.
Thank you very much for being afforded this opportunity to give a brief lecture of my book. And thank you for the comments and words of encouragement from the audience. I'm really, really humbled and hope we'll get more platforms where we can exchange views on these issues. But something that I can't just leave without saying is that we have been talking here about Zimbabwe that we fought for, which has actually been divided tribally, something that needs to be dealt with. And what I would like the audience to know is that people might think maybe this rise in nationalism, because it's always referred to as the Matabeleland people wanting to do ABC, but it might start somewhere else in Zimbabwe other than in Matabeleland. I want people to get that very clear, because it is something that has become very, very sensitive in the country, because there's nothing that holds us together to be a nation. So it can start in Masvingo, it can start in Manicaland, while people are looking at Matabeleland, because there is nothing that brings us together. As my sister was talking about an enabling environment, the environment is not there even for professionals, simply because when they get to where they've been employed, they're told, oh, okay, thank you very much for the degrees that you acquired, but that's not the way we do it here. Already there's frustration before you even start working. So my last word is that we will need very, very brave leadership for Zimbabwe to remain a unitary state. And once again, I'm not being sensational. I want people to look themselves in the mirror, especially the leadership, and see how this can be sorted out. There's nothing called a minority. Anybody who talks about a minority is somebody who is actually who supports the partition of Africa. Because people, for instance, I'll give you the Venda, they are in South Africa and Zimbabwe, they are a minority in both countries. The Tongas are a minority in Zambia and in Zimbabwe. They are a minority in both countries. The Manikas, they are a minority in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique. The Kalangas, we are a minority in Botswana and in Zimbabwe because of the partition of Africa. Leaders who claim to be Pan-Africanists seem to be in support of what the Europeans did to us. Last of all, I would like to say thank you once again for this opportunity. Let's think about these things and let's pass them on to the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baba Ndlovu. Thanks very, very much.
This is Mathuleni Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired, inspire.